The Countess shaved her head after being poisoned by her husband and his mistress. There are women whose lives seem so perfect, they don't appear to live in time, only in stillness. Lady Evelyn Sinclair was one of them. She lived in Hawthorne Manor, an estate perched on the edge of an ancient forest where marble staircases curled like white ribbons and roses bloomed even in winter. If you had visited, you might have seen her in the East Garden just after sunrise, gloved hands tending the frost-bitten violets, a book of poetry tucked under one arm, or on the veranda pouring tea from a porcelain set older than her marriage. And had you asked anyone, the cook, the groundskeeper, the stable boy, they all would have said the same thing. She was the heart of the house. She was elegant, made flesh, soft-spoken, with hair the color of moonlight and eyes like glass marbles washed in gray fog. Her voice rarely rose, her presence rarely disappeared. She moved through rooms like a hush, like the brief silence between thunderclaps. And yet, she was never cold, never cruel. She knew the names of every servant, remembered birthdays, left fresh biscuits wrapped in linen napkins for the maids on Mondays. She had no enemies, no heirs. And perhaps that was the problem. Her husband, Lord Thorne Sinclair, was the kind of man poets stopped writing about when realism took hold. Handsome, educated, tall in the way oak trees are, rigid, dignified, weatherproof. They married young, but not recklessly. To those on the outside, it was a romance carved from old novels, a nobleman and his luminous wife ruling over their manor like a living painting. But paintings crack, and behind their carved oak doors, something was shifting. Something subtle. A coldness that moved without footsteps, a silence that arrived without warning. 6 months before everything changed, a girl arrived at Hawthorne. She called herself Dahlia Moreau, a maid from the southern provinces with wide eyes and warm cheeks and a voice that curved upward when she lied. Evelyn welcomed her the way she welcomed everyone, gently, without suspicion. She offered Dahlia old gowns she no longer wore, let her borrow shawls during cold mornings, gave her a pair of pearl-drop earrings for her birthday. She even let her sit in during the evening poetry readings.
She reminds me of my younger self,
Evelyn once said, smiling. But the truth was, Dahlia had never reminded anyone of Evelyn. She reminded them of something else entirely. She watched more than she worked, listened more than she answered, and she stared, too long, too often, at Lord Sinclair. The way her fingers lingered on his cufflinks, the way her laughter came too quickly at his smallest remarks. Evelyn noticed, but she didn't react. Because women like her, women groomed for grace, are taught to swallow doubt before it spoils the tablecloth. It started with a rash. Just a thin red line on the nape of her neck, beneath the clasp of her necklace. Nothing alarming. But by the following week, it had spread. Down her spine, across her shoulders, it burned, itched, inflamed. She told no one. She didn't want to be pitied. Instead, she changed her gowns, chose high collars, dabbed powder, wore perfume strong enough to make her eyes water. And then came the hair. It began with a few strands left on her pillow, then more in the basin, the brush, the towel. And one morning, as she braided it in the mirror, a thick, pale clump fell away as if gravity had simply given up. She blinked. Then I picked it up with steady hands. Lady Evelyn Sinclair had always been known for her hair. It was said to gleam even in candlelight. Now, it dulled like a blade long forgotten. Lord Thorne noticed. Of course he noticed. He kissed her temples, said it was stressful, promised her new oils, new doctors, new pillows. But he also began to come home later, began taking his dinners alone, and on more than one occasion she saw him emerge from the east wing at dusk, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly disheveled, and dahlia's scent clinging to the air. Lavender and orange blossom, the perfume she had given her. One night, Evelyn stood before her mirror longer than usual. Her hair was thinner now, fragile like cobwebs, her eyes sunken from nights of itching, her fingertips red from scratching through silk sleeves. She touched her scalp, wincing. And from down the corridor, laughter. A cork popping. A giggle, breathless and young, Dahlia's voice. Then a man's. Then silence. She didn't cry. Not yet. But that night, she didn't sleep. She sat upright in bed, the candle melting beside her, the air thick with her own heartbeat. Something had broken. Not loudly, not violently, but in the way frost breaks a flower, quietly, while no one's watching. Sometimes ruin arrives in whispers, not storms, not screams, just a door left ajar, a teacup left untouched, a gaze that doesn't hold yours quite long enough. By the end of that week, Lady Evelyn Sinclair would no longer dine with the household. Within 10 days, she would vanish from sight entirely. And by the second full moon, she would be locked in the attic. There are prisons made of stone, and then there are prisons made of silence. Evelyn Sinclair was locked away in the attic of her own home, and no one asked why. Not the servants, not the steward, not even the housekeeper who used to slip lavender soap into her dresser drawers every spring. Lord Thorne told them what to believe.
She's unwell. A condition of the nerves.
He let his voice soften, let the word fragile dangle in the air like perfume. It worked. They nodded and forgot. The attic had once been a storage space, a narrow corridor beneath the roof, boxed in with brittle timber and old moth-eaten drapes. But they made it her cell. No windows that opened. One cot. A rusted wash basin, a cracked mirror someone had carelessly leaned against the wall. She wasn't shackled. She wasn't bound. But she may as well have been buried. At first she waited by the door, sat with her knees tucked to her chest, listening for footsteps, a voice, anything. But no one came. The meals were delivered without knocking, trays of cold broth and hard bread left on the ground as though she were something wild to be fed, not spoken to. She stopped eating on the 3rd day, stopped hoping on the 4th. Her skin itched constantly now, as if something underneath it wanted out. She tore at it until her sleeves were stained. When she slept, she dreamed of things being pulled from her, clumps of hair, ribbons of scalp, pieces of herself unraveling like yarn. And when she woke, those dreams stayed in her hands. Pale strands stuck to her fingertips, covered her pillow, floated in the wash basin. Her once lustrous hair, now a trail of decay that marked wherever she touched. She stopped touching the mirror. Then she started again. Because even a cruel mirror is a kind of company. On the 8th night,
or the 9th, or maybe the 12th, she stood before her reflection, barefoot, wrapped in a thin, torn nightgown, her lips cracked, her collarbone visible through skin stretched too tight. What remained of her hair clung to her scalp in oily, patchy strings. The skin beneath was raw, inflamed, angry. She looked like a woman slowly disappearing. And still, no one came. Grief is loud at first, but when it settles in your bones, it becomes something else. Something quiet and sharp.
That night, she didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged beside the wall, staring into the dark. And in the morning, she found the shears. They had been left behind, long ago, perhaps by a servant mending old curtains. Blunt at the tips, dull at the hinge, rusted slightly where sweat had eaten the metal. She held them in her lap, heavy, unassuming, like all dangerous things. She didn't hesitate, didn't pray, didn't ask what this would mean. She simply sat down before the mirror and began. The first lock came away easily. It slid off her shoulder and curled like a ribbon in her lap. Then another. She didn't flinch. She took it all. No precision, no vanity, no symmetry, just silence. Hair fell against her knees, tangled between her fingers. Some clung to her lips, some slid across her thighs like threads of silk. She cut until the shears dulled, until her scalp was exposed, until there was nothing left to take except blood. She nicked herself once, twice, didn't wince, didn't stop. When she finished, she dropped the shears. They clattered against the floorboards and rolled under the cot. She didn't pick them up. Instead, she stood. She walked to the mirror and looked. There are moments when pain becomes so complete you stop recognizing it as pain. It becomes colder, cleaner, like a line finally drawn. She looked into her own eyes, hollow, rimmed in purple, but alert. She looked like death and like survival, twinned. And then, for the first time since she arrived, she made a sound. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a release of everything soft. Everything is forgiving. Everything that had once knelt before her husband's cruelty and called it love. And then there was silence. Downstairs, the manor breathed on without her. Dahlia wore her robes now, slept in her bed, laughed in the hallway like she had never belonged anywhere else. Lord Thorne? He barely spoke of Eveline anymore. "She's away," he said once, lazily to a guest. Away, as if she had left by choice. But someone else had noticed. Lucas Bellamy, the night guard. He wasn't a man of words, but he noticed things. The way the window in the attic glowed faintly at night. The way he saw a face, pale, still, barely moving, watching from behind the glass. At first, he told himself it was a shadow, moonlight, imagination, until he heard it. He paused beneath the western wing, looked up, and this time he didn't look away. He waited 3 more nights, until he was sure, until the sound came again, a kind of pleading that words had forgotten, and on the 4th, he went looking for the key. Some men serve orders, others serve justice. Lucas Bellamy had never saved a life before, but he had once carried a dying man down a battlefield and remembered the weight of someone who wanted to live. The door opened. The air inside was thick, stale, unmoving, and in the farthest corner by the window she sat, still. She turned her head, scalp nearly bare, eyes heavy but awake. She looked at him like she was dreaming.
Please, don't lie to me.
I'm not here to lie. I'm here to bring you back.
She stared at him for a long time. Then she nodded. She had no crown, no ring,
No name in the world is still honored. But in that moment, something returned. Not status, not beauty, but a will. Lady Evelyn Sinclair had decided to rise. She arrived at the courthouse just before noon. The townspeople had gathered since morning, some out of curiosity, some out of shame, and some because they sensed something in the air had shifted. And then the doors opened. She walked in. Lady Evelyn Sinclair. No veil, no powdered skin, no attempt to restore what was taken, only a shaved head, pale skin, and a spine made of something no one could name. She didn't enter like a victim. She entered like justice given form. No one laughed. Not one of them looked her in the eye, because not one of them, not a single soul in that chamber, could claim innocence. They had all seen the signs, heard the rumors, closed the doors. When Dahlia was brought in, tear-streaked, no longer glowing, the silence deepened. She looked toward Evelyn, eyes wide, terrified.
I didn't know. I thought you'd left.
I wasn't gone. I was hidden.
The trial began. Lucas spoke first. His voice is steady, low, unshakable. He described the cries in the night, the pale face in the attic window, the gaunt figure kneeling beside broken glass, and her eyes, not hollow, not yet, just holding on. Then came the cook, the stable boy, even the physician who admitted to certifying Evelyn's mental condition without ever examining her. Truth spilled slowly, like water seeping through stone. No dramatics, no shouting, just facts, and they were damning. Then came the evidence. A small vial, light blue powder sealed in wax, aconitite, a poison once used in silent torture. It burns the skin, melts the hair, clouds the mind, makes you look mad while dying by inches. Alongside it, handwritten notes from Thorn to Dahlia. She'll start losing her hair next. Don't worry, she'll think it's age. Soon enough, you'll wear her dresses like you were born to. Thorn said nothing. He didn't plead, didn't beg, didn't even look at his wife. He just sat there, stone-faced, as the gavel struck. Titles revoked, properties forfeited, names struck from the House of Sinclair. A slow death for a nobleman, and he knew it. Dahlia wasn't so fortunate. Charged with poisoning, conspiracy, attempted fraud. Sentence? Death by hanging, at dawn, public. Justice doesn't always wear white. Sometimes it walks in bald, bruised, and silent, and makes the whole room stand still. The next morning, fog hung low over the square. The scaffold was already set. The crowd doubled. Some whispered prayers. Some held their children close. Evelyn stood at the front, not out of vengeance, not even to watch, but because she refused to look away anymore. Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't cry.
Because punishment isn't the same as peace. It's just an ending. Everything was returned to her. The title, the estate, the name. She declined them all. 1 month later, she moved to a small cottage near the sea. Stone walls, no staff, no luxuries. Just gulls and salt wind and the quiet that finally belonged to her. Lucas visited on Sundays. He brought books, lavender, sometimes nothing but silence. They never spoke of the attic. They didn't need to. Evelyn wrote again, not of what she'd lost, but of what the clouds looked like over Camber Bay, what the wind sounded like at 3 a.m. She wrote of presence, of breath, of still being here. One morning, Lucas asked,
If you could go back, would you change anything?
She thought for a long while, then smiled, small, not sad.
No, because if I hadn't lived through it, I wouldn't know what freedom tastes like.
Spring has come. The sea warmed. Birded song returned to the cliffs, and Evelyn bloomed quietly. Her hair grew in curls now, soft and silver. She didn't dye it, didn't hide it. She simply let it be. Then one day she walked to the highest cliff. In her hand, her wedding ring. Platinum, blue stone. Once, a promise. Now, a burden. She held it up to the sun and let it go. Not to forget, but to forgive herself. For staying, for trusting, for surviving in silence too long. Some say if you walk near Camber Cliffs on a windy day, you might see her. Silver-haired, barefoot, eyes toward the horizon. Not a lady, not a wife, not a victim. Just Evelyn. And that is enough.